Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the Trust Fundraising Hub. My name is Beth Upton. I am the CEO at Money Tree Fundraising and we are the hosts of the Trust Fundraising Hub. I'm live now answering any and all of your questions about trust fundraising for the next half an hour. I do this every month. And if you're seeing this video back and you're thinking, I wish I'd come to that, then just to let you know, our next one is also at 12:15, also on a Thursday, and it will be Thursday the 17th of June, again live here on the Trust Fundraising Hub. We also take the recordings of these events and put them onto our YouTube channel. So if you search on YouTube for Money Tree Fundraising, you will be able to find our previous lives there, which are all about half an hour long. And I either answer questions that have come up for me in advance of the event or that come up live. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop your question in the comment box. Otherwise, I have one question that came up a couple of days ago about KPIs on the group that I thought I would start with. So, what are good KPIs for a trust fundraising program? So obviously we've got the basic, how much money do you bring in, KPI, but I think that out of context that's not very fair. So what I would be looking for in measuring the performance of my trust fundraising team would be, am I having trouble with my live? I've just had that question, hold on. Just going to check that everyone else can see me. I can see that I've got 4 people live with me. What would be great, having just had a comment saying I'm having trouble with it, is if you 4 people could wave in the comments and say hello so that I know that I'm definitely speaking to someone. And I'll start my bit in a minute. No, I'm not hearing anything. All clear and loud on your internet. Well, thanks, Sarah. Well, I will carry on in that case. So it must be a problem at the other person's end. KPIs for a trust fundraising program. Hi, Emma. Yeah, it is at the other person's end. Okay. So obviously income is like the core KPI for any fundraiser, but you've kind of got to think through what is the process to get to great trust fundraising income and see how you measure each of those steps. So let's start at the beginning. You start with prospecting. So and prospecting, when you start a new trust fundraising program, is probably a big piece of work. You come up with your initial prospect list, but every month, every day almost, you've got to be refreshing that list because trusts will be changing their criteria. New trusts will come on board, old trusts or other trusts will change their criteria and won't be relevant anymore. They'll be updating when their applications are open, what they're looking for, that kind of thing. So the first thing is looking at prospecting. So like I said, there's 2 parts. There's the initial KPI of creating a portfolio, and then I would be looking at a number of researches done in any given period. So that depends on the size of your program and the volume of team you've got. You might be looking at a monthly KPI of you have prospected at least X new or updated the information on Y existing prospects. So you think about prospecting. Then you've got a sort of a volume of applications KPI, and I think it's sensible to split that out, even in a small team, to small, medium and large. So, you know, easy and straightforward and complex, I guess, at either end of the scale and somewhere in the middle. So you've got on the one side a kind of, you know, a big lottery, complicated, might take weeks and weeks of full-time working on it thing, something like the Heritage Lottery, down to, you know, they're a good prospect because they fund organisations like you. They don't have an application process, so what you're doing is a 2-pager tailored letter and sending it off, and they're relatively straightforward. So definitely, how many of all of those across your spectrum are you doing? Because there's no point just doing this one, because although it's big and it could win you a lot of money, all your eggs in one basket if all you've done is spend your time there. So you need some at this other end of the spectrum as well. So you've got volume of applications, prospecting time. Once you get the gifts, obviously what you need to measure is your success rate. The number of gifts you're getting, the average gift size is useful. Obviously there might be some outliers, like I've said, a massive heritage lottery fund might be an outlier for your organisation and might not. So if it is, take it out so that it doesn't skew your averages. And also growth. So you start by winning, say, you know, £100,000 this year, and the next year is 110, and after that it grows and grows and grows. So being able to measure growth year on year is great, because trust tends to be that kind of steady workhorse type of thing. I'm always asked what the next innovation is going to be in trust fundraising. I can only speak at conferences if I've got an innovative approach to trust fundraising. And the truth is, you know, you guys are trust fundraisers, you know this stuff, you know that you are just sitting there doing great research, writing coherently, building relationships, reporting on time. You are doing the same thing, and that works, right? You all know that. So absolutely, you're looking at growth so that you can prove to your organisation that it's working, and you can also start measuring when you might need to invest in more team, when you're starting to reach that breaking point. If you don't keep a track on it, it can creep up on you. I would also say your cost income ratios, you know, that's kind of, and your return on investment as two separate things to make sure that you are making enough money and your net income is good. And then you must also, you know, the next KPI is keeping your donors happy. So something about reports. That could be number of reports submitted. I would like to see a timeliness, and I've never couldn't quite work out when I was preparing for today what exactly it would look like, but something about the timeliness of reporting, because actually it's not just writing the reports, it's making sure you write the reports on time, that you do it within the deadline. So something like that. If you've got a big program, you can kind of use some of the language that we might feel is more common around individual giving. You can talk about retention rates, so how many of your donors are repeat donors, how many of your donors are new donors, so what's your acquisition rate, how many of your trust donors are not giving anymore, so what's your lapsing rate. Now some of that lapsing rate will be because a trust won't give to the same cause more than X number of times or more than X frequency. Some of it will be because they change their criteria, and some of it will be because they don't choose you again. So the lapsing rate is useful. And also your reactivation rate. So if they've lapsed, and I think you've got to think about, if you can only apply every 3 years, year 2 and year 3 are not lapsed years. So that donor only becomes a lapsed donor when you apply that second time and they don't give. So you've got to think through how you measure lapsing. And then if you keep applying year in, year out, eventually they might give again, and that would be your reactivation number. So I think all of that stuff. So sort of if I go through it quickly as a checklist. Time spent prospecting / number of prospects. Volume of applications split into small, medium and large, so easy to complex. Average gift size, number of gifts, growth percentage. Reports submitted and reporting timeliness. If you want to go super complex, retention, acquisition, lapsing, reactivation rates. And of course your cost income ratio and your ROI, your return on investment. So there you go. I hope that kind of gives a comprehensive view of all of the KPIs I recommend. I think how many of those you choose to measure depends on the size of your organisation and the complexity that you think is useful to add into your daily life. You know, if you're a one-person band, then you've kind of got to streamline it. I still think KPIs are useful, even as a sole trader. When I started out my consultancy, I did KPIs for myself, because you've got to hold yourself to account and know what success looks like. And like I say, some of those are around working out when you've reached this kind of limit of your capacity, and without measuring and without understanding growth, perhaps that can be quite difficult to do. So that is the one question I have before me in advance. So if anyone now, hello, thank you so much for reassuring me that you can hear me and what have you. So my next question, which came up in the group recently, which also hasn't been answered, is sort of trust fundraising adjacent. It's definitely a question that comes up on the group regularly from those of you who work for smaller charities, is around, I will come to your question in a minute, Emma, is around, is a CRM worth it? So in case you don't know what a CRM is, CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. So that would be a database, basically, somewhere where you can hold all of your customer data. So for charities, that's either service users or donors, and they tend to sit in separate databases for very good data security reasons. Is it worth investing in that? And I would say, as a very small charity, from a donor point of view, if you can easily and readily manage your donors off a spreadsheet, no. It's definitely not a startup expense that you need to spend. But there will come a point in your complexity where it's no longer okay. Now, that will either come when people stop using the spreadsheets, or if you as the founder person is moving on, that's a good signal to get a CRM. But basically, nobody inherits a spreadsheet and uses it in the same way that the spreadsheet was originally set up, in my experience. And so you start getting data drift. So spreadsheets are not as secure. So you need to be really conscious of your security because you're putting personal data onto a spreadsheet. Whereas the CRM systems that you're buying, there's loads of them out there. There's one by Blackboard, Razor's Edge, Donify, Thank You, all sorts. And I certainly don't have any affiliations to any of them. But they are secure. They've gone through rigorous testing to make sure that your data will be secure and you can trust them. Whereas a spreadsheet just isn't. And you can also do more complex sort of 3D data interactions. So a spreadsheet's pretty 2D unless you're really good at pivot tables, and even then, you're getting a lot of columns and a lot of complexity in there. Whereas, you might have someone and you want to track the communications and the donations and the interactions with another person. They might be an employee, and suddenly, you're looking at a map style. All of that can be managed by a CRM. So I'd say there comes a point in every organisation's development where, yes, please get a CRM. But as a startup, no. And I can't remember who asked that question, but I hope that answers it. How many times do you unsuccessfully apply to a trust before you strike them off your list? I would say that you just keep trying, Emma, unless you've had specific feedback. So as long as every single time you're applying to that trust, you're doing your due diligence, you're checking their accounts, you're making sure they probably don't have a website, right? They probably don't have someone you can call or email, but they do have their accounts on the Charity Commission website. And almost all trusts do list the names of the charities they've given their donations to, or at the very least they talk about the broad charitable areas that they give them to. So as long as you're doing whatever you can in terms of due diligence and you're confident that if no one else applied they would say yes to you, then keep going. It is sometimes soul destroying. I would say after half a dozen approaches or so, and I'm picking a number out of the air, you might want to try and do an application swap with a peer. So someone who's working in a similar organisation, or maybe a completely different organisation type can be helpful, who can review your application and in return you'll review theirs, and you can both kind of have a bit of honest critique around, is there any hidden jargon, is there something that you've kind of internalised that you've forgotten isn't very understandable to other people, that kind of process, just to make sure your applications are as strong as they can be. I definitely think after a few applications where they're unsuccessful, you need to shake it up and do something different. If you're submitting for the same project using the same words, using the same template, it'll be like, oh, it's that standard thing we rejected last year, let's not even bother. So you need to shake it up in some way. It needs to sound and look different each time, or at least every few times. But as long as there's no reason you shouldn't apply, you shouldn't strike them off. I guess you put them to the bottom of your priority list. That's something I used to do when I was a trust fundraiser, is I had a hat on the end of my table, end of my desk, and I had printed off a list of small trusts, the ones, they've come up on the list from the searchable database, but they're only got the Charity Commission information, so broadly they support health, but who knows whether they're going to support, in this case it was haemophilia. And it was my Friday afternoon gig. Every Friday afternoon I worked full time, so it was easier. It might be your Wednesday afternoon job, who knows. I would pick one name out of the hat, and before I went home on a Friday afternoon I would have researched that trust properly and I would have written an application to them. And I used to promise myself I would do as little sort of cut and paste and what have you as possible. Obviously I'd work out what they wanted to fund and then go and familiarise myself with the project. But the whole point of spending 3.5 hours on it was that I would do the copy from scratch each time. And that's how I got my small applications out every week. I got one small application out every single week on that basis. If it was super easy, I might do two, but didn't really. They weren't ever that easy, especially when you had the whole write all the copy from scratch thing every week. So that helped me keep my writing fresh as well, forcing myself to write it from scratch. Suzanne, do I know any companies that work out social return on investment? The truth is no, not off the top of my head. I think it's a good question for the group. Oh God, that was one. It's gonna bug me, Suzanne, and I'm not going to be able to think of it off the top of my head. It's quite a complicated thing to do, and it could involve quite a lot of organisational change, being ready to do that. So it's sort of a bit bigger. It should at least be a bit bigger than fundraising, which hopefully you and your organisation are prepared for. Any more questions? So I have something I wanted to talk to you guys about, which is the campaign called Fix the Form. I don't know if you are aware of it. It's a campaign to get grant makers to think through their application forms and application processes better and make them easier for grantees. And you can Google Fix the Form. And what they're looking for at the moment is more organisations, more fundraisers to get involved. Most of the big grant makers are on board now. But what they're looking for is help to identify the smaller grant makers, and you can get involved and kind of prompt your grant maker or prompt the Fix the Form team to approach them and get more charities, more grant makers, involved in this Fix the Form campaign, which I think is excellent. What I would do after this live has finished is I will find the details and I will post them onto the group so everyone can look at Fix the Form and find out a bit more about it. There's a grant maker, a woman who works at a grant maker called Laura Solomons, who I know, and what I might do is see if I can get her to come on over and talk to the group about her work a bit. The other request we've had for talking in our lives is a fundraiser who is updating the Directory of Social Changes book on trust fundraising. And I'm just going to grab my very out-of-date version of it if I can find it. Oh, mine's not so out-of-date. It's a middle range out-of-date version. So I don't know if you're familiar, the DSC, Directory of Social Change, has a series of books called the Fundraising series. Very practical, very brief, thin books. We like those. Very practical books on each specialism. So on my bookshelf, I've got major donors, community, strategy, capital campaigns, corporate fundraising, legacy fundraising, and this one, trust fundraising. There's a fundraiser who's updating this at the moment, and she wondered if she could come on the group next month and hear from you guys about what you would like to have included in a trust fundraising handbook. If you were to own one, what would be your ideal thing? So I might put a question in the group about that as well and see if everyone's okay with that and if that's something that would be of interest, and then we can maybe invite her along as well. And if any of you ever want a particular speaker or you want someone to speak on a particular topic, then all you have to do is say, and I will do my best to use my networks to find us speakers on different topics, either during these lives or we can do some extra events as well. And if no one has any more questions, and I will wait a minute to make sure everyone has asked them if they want to, if no one has any more questions, I will offer my goodbyes. before I do so, I'm going to do my monthly. I hope you're all taking a break. Trust fundraising seems to have kind of calmed down a bit, but I know that there are fundraisers still on furlough, either full-time or part-time, and I know that we're now opening up the conversations about whether we're going to go back in our offices full-time, part-time, when's that going to happen, what's that look like, and I think everyone's got different comfort levels around whether they want to work in an office, whether they want to commute, whether they want to work from home, whether that's isolating or enabling. And I think it's going to be another sort of unsure, uneven time for us all as we kind of transition into the next phase. You know, at the back of my mind, I've got the kind of this Indian variant, for want of a better word, I can never remember, 617.2 variant, in the back of my mind that might mean we go into another lockdown. It might mean that offices can't open and things like that, and it feels quite uneasy for me, and I work from home all the time, and I have done for more than a decade. So you guys, you know, please keep being aware of your mental health and your mental well-being. Particularly, it's been one heck of an 18 months, I would say. It's nearly 18 months, definitely one heck of a year. I don't think that shows any signs of changing. You know, the organisational pressures for your income will be different this year, but that doesn't mean they're any less. And I want you all to make sure that you're taking good time off, you're looking after yourselves, you're drinking plenty of water, you're getting some nice fresh air. Try and get some sunshine when it's not hailing in the summer. I mean, I can't really help you with that much, but please look after yourselves. Comment afterwards if you want to hear from anyone or anything else. And other than that, just to say again that I am live again on Thursday the 17th of June at 12:15, so just after noon next month. And you can either join me live and ask questions, or you can post questions on the group during the month and I will answer them live as long as I've noticed them. So without more ado, thank you so much for your time today, everybody, and goodbye.